Now that the offseason is officially here, let's talk about what we want to see from the Tigers this winter. All today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Monday, November 4th, 2024. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start off the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Hope everyone had a fantastic weekend. Happy Monday to all. So Friday's show, we really kind of road mapped I said road really interestingly there. We kind of roadmapped the entire offseason, right? And we talked about what the important dates were and big name players that were going to be on the market, big name players that were going to be on the trade market, you name it. We kind of just laid the groundwork and the foundational work for most of the offseason. We are going to have a conversation today that I also think is part of laying the groundwork for the rest of the week, the conversations we have the rest of the week, and really the rest of the offseason. And that is, what are the Tigers' biggest needs this winter? And I want to almost break this up into different tiers, if you will. And I'm not asking for, 8 to 10 different rankings on what you want to see from different positions or whatnot. That was worded poorly. All I'm saying is give me 3 tiers. Okay. Give me 3 must-haves. In a perfect world, I would like it, but I can live without and don't need. Right. So let's go with that. We have a group of positions, specific types of players, specific archetypes of players that fit in to those 3 categories. We're not going to talk too terribly much, if at all, about the positions that we don't need at all, because this is an episode talking about what we need and we don't need. Does anyone really want a center fielder? I'm good. We have literally Superman in center field. I'm okay. Does anyone need I was going to say need an ace. Pitcher's a little bit more different because, if you have 2 aces, you can just throw them one after the other. So I guess maybe that's not super fair. But, does anyone need a left-handed hitting left fielder? No, that's not going to be high on anybody's wish list, right? So I think that is an important exercise to have. And then when we get into, obviously, as the offseason goes along, the rest of the week, etc., deep diving on specific players that are on the market, free agency, trade, whatever, and they're fit within the organization, we can use this as somewhat of a reference point. So the first position and this is all based off somewhat is just kind of looking ahead to 2025 and thinking, well, what do we have to play at this position right now? And then obviously a large majority is going to be the production that the Tigers received from that position or from that role in 2024. Third base has been talked about for, I think, my entire tenure hosting this show. No, I took over when Jamer was still here, actually. So probably not the entire tenure, but definitely the last 2.5 years, calendar years from now. And we talked about on Friday a little bit that the free agents that are available and who is out there to get up, to bring in. And I think that everyone's initial reaction is just going to be go after Bregman. And I completely understand that. And we're going to have a whole episode dedicated to, talking about Bregman's fit on this team and whatnot. He's the best third baseman on the market, though. Would he be a great add? I have a hard time turning away talented baseball players that would immediately make this team better. So I think that most people would be in favor of adding him. Now, obviously, you start getting into the politics of how much money and term, and are you comfortable signing him long term and whatnot. We'll get to that when we get to that. But Eugenio Suarez, his option was picked up over the weekend. So you are looking at a third base field where there is a massive drop off in 2024 production after Alex Bregman. There's also plenty of trade pieces. We talked about that a little bit on Friday as well. Brett Beatty comes to mind, but we covered that in depth on Friday's show. The Tigers got 0.9 FanGraphs WAR from third base this season, and Matt Vierling was 1.3 of that WAR. So, for all you mathematicians at home, you are correct. Everybody not named Matt Vierling combined for negative WAR at third base. And this is one of the reasons we love Vierling, is because I'm going to go through several positions that I want to see, and he's going to be a positive contributor in most of them, sans the pitching department. Right? So I think that is why I want an everyday third baseman. And we'll get to outfield in a second. I want an everyday right-handed hitting outfielder, because I think Matt Vierling's peak value is when you can move him all over the diamond and he can play a different position dang near every day. I want more from this position and have for a long time. And it is very frustrating to see third base consistently be somewhat of an afterthought with this organization. You know, last year, this show, we were talking consistently, nonstop, about how we wanted to add a third baseman, and how it would be better than it was in 2023, because it's hard to be worse than third base for the Tigers in 2023. That was an absolute disaster. So it would be better because of addition by subtraction, right? Nick Maton and his negative 1.5 WAR or whatever it ended up being was obviously getting offloaded, plus a couple of other players that were part of that revolving door at third base that season. But an improvement over 2023 for third base, it should not be the bar going forward. If you want to be a consistent, legitimate threat and make this roster a consistent playoff caliber roster, you have to bring in an everyday, legitimate third baseman. Because 0.9 WAR using the revolving door is just not going to cut it at a premier infield position. Certainly not long term. So, get a third baseman. And if you're really big on someone to play third base within the organization long term, right? If there's someone in there you're like, "Oh, well, what about so and so down in the minor leagues? He's doing really well. I want him to play third." That's fine. That is a great problem to have. That's fine. Then sign someone to a 2 or 3 year deal. I'm not saying you have to go out and drop, 10 years, $300 million. That's not at all what I'm saying. But you need a legitimate, solid cornerstone over there at the hot corner, because it's been a long, long time. Okay, let's head to a break, and then we'll get into all the other positions I want to talk about. Okay, third base is just very obviously kind of the star of the show here, but there's a lot of other needs that I think this team has going into the winter. We will talk about all of those right after this. Got to talk to y'all today about our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is the best in the business. We love our friends over at FanDuel, and you can tackle the NFL action today with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place your bets on the NFL all in one single place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place all of your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow. Tomorrow's episode, we should have a decision on the Casey Mize option. We are all expecting it to get declined and then them just resettle for a cheaper, less expensive deal outside of that. But we'll see what happens. We'll also look around the sport in what was a very busy weekend, talk about players that are going to be free agents, that aren't, as all of those final decisions roll in, how that plays into the Tigers and whatnot. We'll continue our player breakdown series the rest of the week, and we will, of course, start deep diving on off-season players that you all want to talk about. So busy week, fun week. Hopefully we can keep that rolling the rest of the winter. Let's talk about outfield. So as we have mentioned a lot, this is not new if you are a longtime listener of this show. This is not new if this is your first time listening to the show, but you watch the Tigers almost every game this year. The Tigers really need to add a right-handed hitting outfielder. And again, that's not a hot take. That's not news to anybody who even remotely follows this team. They received just 1.3 WAR from right-handed hitting outfielders over the course of the entire season. And 0.8 of that was from Mark Canha. So that's half a win from people that were on the team after the trade deadline. Vierling was +1 WAR yet again, which also means that everybody not named Vierling and Canha was slightly negative. You did not have any depth at this position. And again, I think this plays into Vierling's strengths here, right? If he can be a +1 player at like 3 different positions, that's an incredibly valuable asset, right? If Matt Vierling's a 3-win player playing 4 or 5 different positions, I will cry tears of joy. That is an awesome baseball player. That is an incredible asset to have. But if Matt Vierling is your everyday right-handed hitting outfielder, that's a 1-win player. Maybe even a slightly less than 1-win player. That's not going to cut it either over the course of 162. So we really, really, really need a right-handed hitting outfielder that you can rely on to play every day. Now, will he play every day? No, because AJ Hinch is a madman, and, well, in the best positive connotation. And if we play a righty, if we face a righty, you're probably going to get the Meadows Green Carpenter outfield thrown at you. Now, if you find a right-handed hitting outfielder that can also hit righties, then you make the outfield just deeper all around. This is a really, really important ask for me as well. Third base and right-handed hitting outfielder, both in the top tier of like, I need this before pitchers and catchers report and before spring training. Need these 2 positions to be addressed. The next one, let's head over to the pitching side of things. Okay. I legitimately, and this is the first time I'm putting a number to this, I need 2 or even 3 starting pitchers this winter, legitimately. You will not make it again of the pitching chaos over 162. You need innings desperately. Right now, your rotation of like guaranteed players in 2025 is 2 people. It's Tarek Skubal and Reese Olson. Now, you have a flurry of other candidates in there that you can argue. Obviously, Casey Mize, as we talked about, is going to be a big one. Cater Montero, Jackson Jobe, I guess Kenta Maeda if you really wanted to, but I don't think too many people in the fan base are going to be really, like clamoring for that to happen. You had Brant Herter down the stretch, was really good in multiple innings roles, right? Like you certainly have a plethora of players who can fill in and who can be solid starting pitchers in spurts. But I really, really, really need multiple proven, solid starting pitchers that I can rely on for 150 plus innings next year. Because this is like the 27 millionth year in a row that this team, by the middle of the summer, we look around and go, we have no pitching because they're all hurt. It has literally happened every year since the COVID season. And it's not just a Tigers thing, right? I have people all the time that are like, well, is that like Fetter's fault? Is that Lund's fault? Is that like the training staff's fault? No, that's just baseball's fault. That is where the sport has headed. Everyone is trying max effort all the time. So, and hitters are the best that they have been in quite some time, possibly ever. And so you are now faced with this, okay, well, if you want to be more effective, you have to throw harder, but also you're pretty much guaranteed to hurt yourself multiple times in your career. And I'm not here to get into like the philosophical, like, is that good or bad for baseball or whatever. That's just tunnel vision. That is where the game is right now. You need starting pitching depth if you want to make it over the course of a season. Now, it's really nice to know that we have such a good manager that even if you do sign 3 starting pitchers and all 5 of them get depleted, that we're still going to have a fighting chance most days. That's really reassuring. But you cannot go into the season going, well, we'll just go with what we have because, like, if people get hurt, pitching chaos, LOL. Like, you need innings. So you could sign 2 and have 2 proven, right? Tarek Skubal, Reese Olson, 2 starting pitcher free agents, and then have Mize, Montero, Jobe kind of, compete, battle out, or just throughout the course of a season, injuries happen, whatever, kind of rotate in that 5th spot. You also could just sign 3 starting pitchers and have those 3 guys just be readily available. I mean, Matt Manning's in that conversation, right? How quickly things changed from a year ago. It's going to be fluid at the bottom for sure. But in order to make it a fluid situation at the bottom and to provide yourself starting pitching depth, you need to go out and sign a couple. Also, if we want to get a little bit more specific, I would love another left-handed starting pitcher. All of the names I just mentioned, outside of Tarek Skubals, are righties. And I think that making the rotation more balanced in terms of righty-lefty can only lead to good things. I think it helps with matchup ball over the course of a series as well, right? As it stands right now, unless you're facing Tarek Skubal and pre-pitching chaos, you are going to face a righty more times than not. So I think that can only help as well. And it can be anywhere in the rotation. I don't need like a top end, lefty so that the 1-2 are both lefty. Like, it can be the 5 starter for all I care. But I do think that another left-handed starting pitcher would actually go a long way for this team. So that's another kind of specific area that I'm looking for. Lastly, on the must-haves list, okay, a high K-rate reliever. And I have also repeated this about 1 billion times over the last couple of months. The Tigers were 26th in strikeout rate from relievers, despite how good the bullpen was down the stretch. 26, the 5th lowest K rate in baseball from relief pitching over the course of the season. You need to find one or even multiple high strikeout guys that you can put in those late game situations, those high leverage situations where you need a strikeout. Because right now, I don't think there's anybody, unless Alex Lang figures out how to throw strikes more. I also think, and this is kind of a 1A, 1B situation. Like you can get both of these within one player. So they're kind of two separate, but they also could be the same. A righty reliever. This was really interesting when looking throughout the 40-man roster and doing some deep dives on the production from the bullpen and where the Tigers got their production from relievers. They had the fourth best production in baseball from lefty relievers over the course of the season. Beautiful. Then when we talk about the best relievers in this bullpen, outside of Jason Foley, you're talking about a lot of lefties, right? And Tyler Holton obviously is at the top of that. The Tigers ranked 23rd in baseball from right-handed relievers. So, if you find a righty that can get a lot of strikeouts, two birds with one stone, that's a beauty. But in order to help AJ Hinch and his masterful chess that he plays with bullpen management and using righty lefties in certain situations, you have to give him better chess pieces. You have to give him tools to be able to utilize how good of a manager he is. And I think that you have the lefties figured out for the most part, right? You got some really solid lefty, multiple solid left-handed relievers now, but you need to take a step in the right direction as far as righty relievers go on this team, especially when compared to the rest of the American League and the rest of baseball. Let's get into in a perfect world, I would like this, but it's not necessarily as much of a need as maybe the other positions I've listed, and then we'll wrap it up by just kind of talking about the wish list as a whole. We will do all of that right after this. Got to talk to y'all today about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is also the best in the business at getting you tickets at unbelievable prices. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They have so many other great features on top of Game Time Picks as well. All-in pricing, so you can see your entire total up front. Seat views, so you get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy. And then obviously your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. So let's get into our perfect world additions, right? Things that aren't necessarily needs, but I would want this. And if it was added, I would be very happy. But if that isn't added going into the year, I can at least live with it and not be like, wow, the 2025 season is ruined. This is a complete catastrophe. We're going to start with shortstop. We did a whole episode last week, I believe, maybe 2 weeks ago now, just on the shortstop position as a whole. Obviously, Sweeney, we talked Baez. So if you want a more in-depth breakdown of the shortstop position, you can go listen to that show. My biggest rallying cry in that episode was if you want to go into next year without adding a shortstop this winter, I can somewhat see the vision. I'm not saying I necessarily love it or that I think it's going to be really great, but I can at least somewhat justify the Sweeney and Baez platoon next season. My biggest thing that is a must is you cannot have Javi Baez be the 162 game starter at shortstop next season. You can't, under no circumstance. So, as we talked about on that episode, would the platoon of the two of them be great? We'll see. I have my reservations, but I can at least somewhat live with that. A full season of Trey Sweeney. We've obviously only seen about a month and a half of production there, but the Tigers ranked dead last in baseball in shortstop value this past year. They were worth 0.1 WAR on FanGraphs. 0.1. Now, Javi was negative WAR A couple of other players they threw there were negative. Trey Sweeney was positive. Zach McKinstry was positive. But all over the course of the whole season, almost net zero at the position of shortstop. And you need to be just way better than that. That is a premier position. That is such an important position on the field. One of the most important on the entire diamond. You cannot rank dead last in that again and again and again and expect to consistently be a really good team if you have other holes on your roster, which the Tigers obviously still do. So, if they were to bring in a shortstop and they were to do some gymnastics to make it so that this imaginary new player is going to be the everyday starter at short next year, and it was a really good, proven solid player that they, shoveled over some money to get, I would be pleased. I would be very happy with that. I'd be very content with it. But I'm not expecting it to happen for starters. And if it doesn't happen, I still think the team can take steps in the right direction and be solid next year with what they currently have on the roster. The other position that falls under that umbrella is very obviously first base. The Tigers received 0.5 WAR from first base in 2024, and Spencer Torkelson was 0.1 of that 0.5. Bly Madris, who played in about half of the games as Torkelson did at first base, maybe even less, was 0.4 FWAR at first base. Now, this one is, I don't want to say controversial, but I think that this is the one that if anybody is to disagree with the placement of any thing that I've said so far, I think it's going to be that there's probably a group of the fan base that would have first base as like a must get top priority and not we'll see what happens in 2025, idiot. And that's what they're saying to me right now. And I understand. I completely understand. And I don't even really disagree with you. First base is such a wild concept to me at the moment. The concept of first base. It is so odd to me how the Tigers have set themselves up, because the previous regime just went all in on Torque and was like, we're not going to make anybody else in this organization even like touch a first base glove because we're just all in on this guy. And now it hasn't been sunshine and rainbows, and there's a lot of question marks about like, well, can we move anybody there? I completely understand if you are sitting there going, I don't care what this dude says or what anybody says. The Tigers need to go out and get a first baseman. I get it. Where I stand is I don't think they need a starting caliber top end first baseman. I think I would take it, and I would be pretty happy with it, and I would love it dearly. But I don't think it's as much of a need as the other things and the other positional groups that I've kind of laid out here. Whereas getting a solid safety valve option at first base and seeing how Torkelson does, I think is far more realistic, especially if you're spending money to the other positions that I've already laid out for you. It's like fifth on my priority list, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So what does all this mean? It means that I think this team cannot just sit on its hands and think, well, naturally, we're just going to repeat the success last year because we did it last year. That was A, not how baseball works at all. B, it involved a like borderline generational run for a month and a half. So it's absurd to me that anybody can think like, well, if we just like stand pat, it's just going to happen again. They took a great step forward. They showed a lot of promise. There's a lot of really, really fun players on this team. There's a lot of assets on this team going forward for the first time in a while. But to keep the momentum going, there's a lot of changes that still need to be made this offseason, a lot of holes that are still left to be filled. This team isn't just going to roll out next season and do the same thing they did automatically this year. And I think that there's still, honestly, a long way to go before this is like one of the better rosters in the American League, despite how far they made it in the postseason this year. So take some steps forward this winter, fill some of these voids that I just listed, and let's have a really fun 2025 because you do have more pieces than you've had in a long time on your roster. You do have a legitimate young core, I think, for the first time in forever. You know what you do to a core? You build around it. That's the whole point of a core. So add to it this winter. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow, keeping the offseason train rolling. I appreciate you all greatly. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch y'all then, baby. Go Tigers.